My name is Amanda, and on May 2nd, I learned exactly how ruthless people can become when power clouds their judgment. It was a Wednesday night, 10:43 p.m., when my boss, Victoria Hale, called me into her office. The night before our global product launch, I'd been leading the development of Nexora, a platform projected to generate over $50 million in its first quarter. I lived and breathed that project for 14 months, sacrificing weekends, birthdays, and every ounce of peace I had left. Victoria sat at her mahogany desk, legs crossed, wine glass in hand, like we were discussing a menu. "Amanda," she said smoothly, "we've decided to move in a different direction." At first, I thought I'd misheard her. A different direction? The launch is tomorrow. Victoria smiled, the kind of smile you see before someone stabs you in the back. "We'll manage without you. Pack up your things." I felt the air leave my lungs. I glanced at the whiteboard behind her, the one I had filled with every critical detail for tomorrow's rollout. "You're firing me the night before launch?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay even. Victoria shrugged. "We appreciate your hard work, truly, but we need someone who fits our vision better. This isn't personal." I stared at her for a moment, taking in the designer's suit, the expensive ring flashing on her finger, the board's approval echoing behind every word. And in that moment, I understood exactly what this was. It wasn't personal. Of course it was. It always is when a woman in power feels threatened by another woman who knows what she's doing. I nodded slowly. "Understood." Victoria leaned back, smug. "I knew you'd be professional about this." I smiled, just slightly. "Always." I packed my things in silence. My laptop, my notes, and one other thing, the encryption key tied directly to the heart of Nexora's back-end code. The key I had created, the key only I had access to. I didn't say a word. I didn't slam doors. I didn't even look back. But as I walked out of the building that night, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Because while Victoria believed she'd erased me from the project, she had no idea I wasn't leaving empty-handed. And I certainly wasn't leaving powerless. Let me take you back 6 months earlier. When Victoria first pitched the idea of Nexora to the board, she had no clear plan, no working prototype, and zero experience in SaaS platforms. But she had ambition and the right connections. I was brought in by the CTO at the time, Daniel Scott, because I'd successfully led 2 other launches at my previous firm. Daniel wanted me to spearhead development quietly while Victoria took the credit publicly. I agreed, not because I'm naive, but because I believed in the product. At first, it didn't bother me. I let Victoria parade around like she'd architected the entire platform. I swallowed the comments. The board meetings where my name wasn't even mentioned. Why? Because I thought the work would speak for itself. I was wrong. The first cracks appeared 3 months ago. A small bug was discovered in the payment module, an issue Victoria insisted the interns fix instead of me. They failed. Twice. I stepped in, fixed it in under an hour, and Victoria publicly thanked the interns in the next meeting. I let it slide. Then came the budget cuts. Victoria cut my QA team by half without consulting me, claiming we didn't need that many testers. I stayed late for a week straight to cover the gaps myself. She noticed and used it to argue in front of the board that I was inefficient. By April, Daniel quietly resigned. Rumors said Victoria pushed him out. That's when I realized exactly how far she was willing to go to clear the path for herself. But I stayed. I kept working, because I wasn't going to walk away from something I'd built, until Wednesday night. That night wasn't just betrayal. It was a declaration of war. And Victoria had no idea what she'd started. Because while she saw me as disposable, she forgot one simple truth. You can't launch a product built on integrity by stabbing the person holding the foundation together. And tomorrow, launch day, she would learn that the hard way. Thursday morning felt strange. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. out of habit. The launch was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, a synchronized global rollout across 3 continents. Months of work, millions of dollars in marketing, investors flying in from New York, Singapore, and Berlin. Everything had been set. Except now, I wasn't part of it. I sat at my kitchen counter, sipping coffee, staring at the glowing numbers on the microwave. I thought about staying away, disconnecting, letting it all unfold without me. But curiosity has a way of creeping in when you know disaster is coming. At 8:45 a.m., I opened my laptop. The Nexora platform launch page was live. Countdown timer ticking down the final seconds. Victoria's pre-recorded message was set to play at exactly 9 a.m., streamed on multiple platforms. A polished, carefully rehearsed speech about innovation, leadership, and bold new frontiers. I took a slow breath. Because here's the thing no one outside the dev team understood. Nexora's backend was designed with a layered encryption sequence. A sequence I'd engineered myself after months of client security audits and compliance requirements. The encryption wasn't just for protection. It was the literal ignition key of the system. Without the correct decryption token, the one stored on my secure drive, the platform wouldn't just malfunction. It wouldn't start. At all. A small, almost invisible safeguard I'd built when Victoria started making reckless decisions months ago. Not out of spite, but because I knew that if Nexora ever launched half-baked, the company could face lawsuits or even collapse. I never imagined I'd need that safeguard for this reason. At 9 a.m. exactly, the launch button was pressed. And nothing happened. I watched the public site hang on the loading screen. The connection error message blinked after 8 seconds. I clicked over to the investor livestream. The camera showed Victoria standing on stage, microphone in hand, the massive screen behind her still black. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She kept smiling. I'll give her credit. She had the CEO facade down to an art. The tech team, my former team, scrambled in the background. I recognized half of them. People I'd trained myself. They frantically checked servers, reloaded dashboards, whispered urgently into headsets. I refreshed the page. Still dead. At 9:05 a.m., the live stream caught a mic whisper. Encryption keys missing. We can't access the mainframe. Victoria's smile wavered. Barely. She turned, snapped something at the lead engineer, a guy she'd promoted over me 2 weeks earlier. By 9:12 a.m., investors were leaving their seats. The live chat exploded with comments. Is this a joke? $50 million launch and they can't even start? Pulling investments now. I leaned back in my chair, letting it sink in. This wasn't petty revenge. I hadn't sabotaged the system. I simply didn't leave behind the keys they had no right to use. I wasn't on their payroll anymore. They fired me. They removed me from every system. But they forgot the most important thing. You can't fire the architect and expect the house to stand. At 9:25 a.m., Victoria finally addressed the crowd. We're experiencing minor technical issues. The launch will be rescheduled. Her voice cracked on the last word. That's when my phone started buzzing. First, it was Mia, the lead developer who'd been my right hand since day one. Mia. Amanda. We didn't know. They locked us out this morning. Please. What's going on? Then Daniel, the ex-CTO. Daniel. I just heard what happened. I'm sorry. I should have warned you about Victoria sooner. By 10 a.m., my inbox was flooded. From engineers, from clients, even from investors. But one message stood out. Victoria Hale. Subject line. Call me. I stared at it for a long moment. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It wasn't triumph. It was something colder. A realization. They never valued the work. Only the control. And when they lost control, they realized who actually held the power. I closed my laptop. Let them sweat. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't pick up Victoria's call. Not right away. I stared at the message for a long time. Call me. Short, cold, no apology, no explanation. The kind of message people send when they think they still hold the upper hand. At 10:15 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it was Mia. Mia, please. I know this isn't my place, but the whole team is panicking. The clients are threatening to pull out. We didn't know they'd lock you out like this. I almost called her back. I really did. But I needed to think. Because here's the truth no one talks about in corporate life. When things go wrong, loyalty dies first. And after loyalty, blame follows like a bloodhound. I knew exactly what Victoria was doing right now. In that boardroom, behind closed doors, she was pointing fingers at me, at the team, at anyone who couldn't push back. I'd seen it happen before. And I wasn't about to step back into a burning building I didn't set on fire. But this wasn't just about me anymore. Mia, the dev team, even Daniel, they didn't deserve to go down in flames for Victoria's ego. By 10:30 a.m., another email arrived. This one from Richard Torres, Chief Legal Officer. Subject: urgent, request for immediate consultation. The message was formal. Too formal. We understand you may have critical information regarding the Nexera encryption protocol. Please contact me directly at your earliest convenience. I stared at those words. Critical information. So now they realized. I poured myself another cup of coffee and let the clock tick. At 10:45 a.m., Victoria herself called again. This time I answered. Victoria, I said calmly. Her voice snapped across the line. Amanda, we need to talk, now. I kept my tone even. About what? Her breath caught, just for a second. The encryption key, the system's dead. Investors are furious. We need access. Immediately. I leaned against the counter. You fired me last night. Amanda, don't play games, she snapped. This company's reputation is at stake. There it was. Not, I'm sorry. Not, we made a mistake. Just her reputation. The company. The investors. I let a silence hang between us. Finally, I said, Victoria, I built that system. I built it with the assumption that I was part of the team, part of the launch. You made it clear I wasn't. You know I didn't mean it like that. Her voice softened. Fake, rehearsed. This is business. You're a professional. Don't let emotions ruin everything you worked for. I almost laughed. Emotions? You're right, I said quietly. This is business. Before she could respond, I added, so let me explain the business situation, Victoria. You fired me without cause, effective immediately. You removed my system access. You revoked my contract. Therefore, any proprietary tools I created, including security protocols, fall under contractual agreement clauses. You'll need to renegotiate if you want access. I could practically hear her jaw clench. You're blackmailing me? I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. I'm explaining reality. You fired the architect. You don't get to keep the keys for free. There was a long, sharp silence. Then she hissed, What do you want? I let that question hang for a moment, because the truth was, I wasn't even sure yet. But I knew one thing. I wasn't stepping back into the mess on their terms. I'll let you know, I said. And I hung up. At 11 a.m., Daniel called. Unlike Victoria, his first words were, Amanda, I'm sorry. I closed my eyes for a second. He sounded sincere. I should have seen this coming, he added. I should have warned you. Victoria's been pushing everyone out. Anyone she saw as a threat. I sighed. I know. I'm not calling on their behalf, Daniel said quietly. I'm calling because the board's meeting this afternoon, and they're panicking. They want answers. Real ones. I frowned. And you're telling me this because they've asked for you to join. I froze. The board? He nodded. Victoria's story isn't holding up. Investors are threatening to sue. The board wants to hear from you, directly. And Amanda, this might be your only chance to set the record straight. I stared at the floor, heart pounding. A week ago, I'd have killed for a seat at that table. Now it felt like a trap, or a turning point. I wasn't sure which yet, but either way, I wasn't going in empty-handed. At 2 p.m. sharp, I walked into the boardroom I'd never been invited to before. 12 people sat around a polished walnut table, directors, investors, legal counsel. I recognized most of them from hallway glances or names on emails I was never copied on. They barely glanced at me when I entered. Victoria sat at the far end, dressed in a tailored navy suit, face perfectly composed. She didn't look my way. Daniel gave me a small nod from the side of the room. His eyes said, "Stay sharp." The chairman, Leonard Marks, motioned to the empty seat across from Victoria. "Amanda, please join us." I sat down, hands steady, heart anything but. Leonard folded his hands. "We asked you here because we believe you have information relevant to this morning's events." I met his gaze evenly. "I do." Victoria cut in, voice smooth as glass. "I think we're all aware of what happened. Amanda misunderstood the terms of her exit. It was a sensitive situation, timing-wise. Unfortunately, there was a gap in handover protocol." I leaned forward slightly. There was no misunderstanding. Victoria terminated my employment less than 12 hours before a global launch and revoked my access. She also failed to secure the encryption key critical to the platform's operation. A murmur rippled around the table. Leonard raised a hand. "Let her speak." I took a slow breath. "This isn't about hurt feelings or some petty sabotage. I created Nixora's encryption framework under strict security protocols. That key was tied to my contract. Standard practice in high-level development. When I was terminated without cause, that key, and my responsibility, ended with it." Victoria's jaw tightened. "You're making this personal." I shook my head. You made it personal when you decided leadership meant eliminating anyone who didn't fit your agenda. And you gambled a $50 million launch on the assumption that I'd either roll over or fix things for you after you fired me. Leonard's expression didn't change, but other board members exchanged glances. One of them, a woman I recognized from investor calls, Marianne Lee, spoke up. "Is this true, Victoria?" Victoria gave a tight smile. "There were tensions. Amanda was difficult to manage. She lacked flexibility in leadership structures." I almost laughed. Difficult to manage because I refused to push out my team. Because I insisted on proper QA. Because I documented every change you made without oversight. Another voice chimed in, this time from Richard Torres, the legal officer. "Documentation?" I met his eyes. "Yes, I have records, emails, project logs, change requests, all showing exactly who made decisions and who overrode them." Silence. Leonard looked directly at me. "You have these records?" I nodded once. "On a secured drive. With timestamps," Victoria snapped, "You're bluffing." I met her glare head-on. If I was bluffing, we wouldn't be having this meeting. Daniel cleared his throat from the side. "She's not bluffing. I've seen the logs. They're real." A new tension settled over the room. Not explosive. Just sharp. Leonard leaned back slowly in his chair. "Victoria, did you authorize the removal of Amanda without ensuring a proper transition protocol?" Victoria opened her mouth. Closed it. Leonard's voice stayed calm. "Answer the question." Victoria's mask cracked just slightly. "I believe the team would manage." A low murmur ran down the table again. Leonard steepled his fingers. "And now we're looking at a failed launch, investor backlash, and possible legal exposure. Because of a belief?" Victoria looked down, her shoulders stiff. Leonard turned to me. "Amanda, if we asked you to assist with recovery, what would it take?" I let that sink in for a moment. This wasn't just about fixing code. It was about who they'd trust moving forward. I chose my words carefully. Full reinstatement. Authority over my team. Direct reporting to this board, not Victoria. And a formal statement clearing me of wrongdoing. Leonard exchanged a look with Marianne. She nodded once. Victoria's head snapped up. You can't be serious. Leonard met her outburst with icy calm. We are. He looked back at me. You'll have a contract in your inbox by the end of the day. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. Then I'll have the system online by tomorrow morning. Victoria's face drained of color. For the first time, she looked powerless. And I realized in that moment, this wasn't just a turning point. This was the moment everything shifted. By 6 p.m., the contract hit my inbox. It was short. Director, reinstatement of employment effective immediately. Temporary authority over international product operations. Direct reporting line to the board of directors. No involvement or oversight by Victoria Hale. The final clause read like a quiet admission. No individual will interfere with Amanda Green's decisions pertaining to Nexora's operation and recovery. I read it 3 times. A week ago, I might have felt victorious. Now, it felt transactional. Because a title didn't change the fact that the same people who let Victoria run unchecked were only stepping in now, when the damage touched their bottom line. At 6:30 p.m., Daniel called. I heard, he said. His voice was careful. You're back. For now, I replied. He hesitated. Amanda, I know how this looks, but this is a chance. I stared out my apartment window at the city skyline. Is it? Or is it just another way to clean up their mess so they can go back to pretending it never happened? Daniel sighed. Maybe, but you're in the room now. And once you're in, you don't have to play by their rules anymore. I appreciated his honesty, and that's when I realized he was right. This wasn't about settling scores. This was about setting a standard. I wasn't here to save their launch. I was here to make sure people like Victoria didn't get the chance to do this to anyone else. By 7 p.m., I walked back into the office for the first time since the night they fired me. The floor was almost empty, just a skeleton crew trying to contain the fallout. Mia was there, typing furiously at her desk. She looked up when I walked in. Her eyes widened. Amanda, you're back? I gave her a small nod. We've got work to do. She stood, almost knocking over her chair. Thank God. You have no idea what it's been like. I do, I said quietly. And it ends now. We gathered the remaining team. No speeches, no big declarations, just clear instructions. We pulled up the server logs, cross-checked security layers, recalibrated encryption sequences. I restored the master key, the right way this time, with oversight. At 9:30 p.m., Mia looked up from her screen. All systems are green. I nodded. Good, let it run diagnostics overnight. We launch tomorrow. On our terms. She hesitated. Amanda, if they try to pull this again... I met her eyes. They won't. Because here's the truth they never expected. The moment you stop playing defense, everything changes. And I wasn't playing defense anymore. At 10 p.m., I walked past Victoria's office. The door was half open. She sat at her desk, staring blankly at her screen. For a moment, I considered walking in, rubbing it in, telling her exactly how it felt to have your power stripped away. But I didn't, because real power isn't about proving a point. It's about making sure the point never needs to be proven again. I kept walking. By midnight, the system passed every test. Secure, stable, ready. I left the office in silence. No victory laps, no smug satisfaction. Just a quiet certainty that by morning, everything would be different. Not because I'd fixed their problem, but because I finally understood something I should have known all along. When you build something with integrity, you don't owe loyalty to people who treat you like you're disposable. You owe it to yourself, and the people who believed in you when it mattered. And tomorrow, I wasn't coming back to clean up their mess. I was coming back to change everything. At 8:55 a.m., I stood in the control room, watching the monitors flicker as Nexora prepared to go live. The energy was different this time. There was no panicked scrambling, no whispered blame, just focused silence. The kind that comes when people know exactly what's expected and trust the person leading them. Mia glanced over from her station. All systems nominal. 30 seconds. I nodded. Let's go. At precisely 9 a.m., Nexora launched. This time, everything worked. The homepage loaded flawlessly across all regions. User sessions fired up without a hitch. Investor dashboards pinged live within seconds. Within 5 minutes, we hit 20,000 concurrent users. By 10 minutes, it was 50,000. No crashes, no glitches, no excuses. The silence in the control room broke with a soft cheer. But I didn't cheer. I just watched and let it settle in. At 9:15 a.m., Leonard called. Amanda. His voice was calm. Well done. Thank you, I said, keeping it professional. He hesitated. We'll need to discuss your next steps. The board is impressed. I let a small smile touch my lips. I'm sure we will. Because I already knew what I was going to say when that conversation happened. At 9:30 a.m., I walked into the boardroom, this time by invitation. Victoria was already inside, seated at the far end. Her face looked tighter than yesterday, paler, like a CEO clinging to a title that no longer meant anything. Leonard stood as I entered. Amanda, please. I took my seat, this time at the center of the table. Daniel sat beside me. Mia, invited as head of development, sat on my other side. Leonard cleared his throat. As you're all aware, Nexora's launch this morning was a success, thanks to Amanda and her team. He didn't say, despite Victoria. He didn't have to. He turned toward Victoria. We've reviewed the internal reports and Amanda's documentation. The board has decided... He paused. To restructure leadership within product operations. Victoria blinked. Restructure? Leonard's expression remained neutral. You'll step back from operational oversight effective immediately. Your role will transition to strategic partnerships. No direct authority over Amanda or her division. Victoria opened her mouth, but Marianne cut her off. We've also decided Amanda will lead product operations on a permanent basis, with board oversight. A hush settled around the room. Victoria turned toward me, eyes flashing. You planned this. I met her gaze calmly. Number you did. She pushed her chair back, standing. This isn't over. I didn't flinch. Maybe, but this part is. Leonard gave her a slow nod. You're dismissed, Victoria. She left without another word. And just like that, the storm passed, but the real decision came after the meeting. At noon, Leonard approached me in the hallway. Amanda, the board wants to discuss a long-term leadership role, vice president level. You've earned it. I looked at him carefully. I'll consider it. He smiled. You've changed how we see things. The way this was handled, it won't happen again. I nodded. I'll hold you to that. Because I wasn't here for a title. I wasn't here to play politics. I was here to make sure no one else on my team or in this company that would ever be thrown aside the way I was. By 4 p.m., I sent out a company-wide message. Leadership isn't about control. It's about accountability. Starting today, every decision in product operations will be transparent and earned. My door is open. Simple, clear, exactly the kind of message I'd always wanted to hear, and never did. At 5 p.m., Mia knocked on my office door. She smiled. I think you just made a lot of people believe in this place again. I gave her a nod. Good, that's the point. Because here's the truth I learned through all of this. Power isn't in titles, or contracts, or boardrooms. It's in knowing who you are, standing your ground, and making sure the people who come after you don't have to fight the same battles you did. Victoria thought firing me would end my career. She was wrong. It ended hers. And it gave me the chance to finally build something that would last. On my terms, with integrity. And no one would ever take that away. The email hit my inbox at 7:01 a.m. on a rainy Thursday, before I'd even poured my first cup of coffee. Subject line, "Let's put our best foot forward," complete with 3 sparkling shoe emojis. Classic Tiffany. I skimmed it once, then again. Corporate fluff disguised as policy. But there it was, buried in the second paragraph like a landmine. Effective immediately, all employees are expected to comply with revised appearance guidelines, particularly concerning textile choices deemed non-traditional. I didn't need a memo to tell me who that was aimed at. No one else in compliance wore tailored wool trousers or structured jackets with clean lines. The others floated in every morning wrapped in sagging khakis, shiny synthetic blends, or discount pencil skirts that rode up like they had a grudge. But me, I dressed like I gave a damn. And apparently, that made me dangerous. Because Tiffany, 32, HR manager, professional grudge holder in nude heels, didn't like women she couldn't control. It started months ago when she accidentally saw my salary. I'll never forget the way her smile froze when she realized I wasn't some junior analyst making entry-level crumbs. Ever since, it felt like I had a target on my back. By 10:13 a.m., Tiffany strolled by my desk, her signature cloud of vanilla body spray arriving a full second before she did. She hovered, then leaned in with that fake friend voice of hers. "Oh, hey, Mia," she said, dragging out my name like she was tasting it. "Just wanted to check in. You had a chance to review the updated dress policy?" I didn't even look up. I did. Nothing in there applies to me. 2 seconds later, like clockwork, Brenda appeared. Tiffany's shadow. The kind of woman who'd rat out her own mother for a pat on the head. "We're really trying to create a cohesive visual identity, you know?" Brenda chirped. "Sometimes, older styles send mixed messages." I finally met their eyes. My voice didn't change. "Mixed messages? To whom? The Pentagon?" Brenda's grin wobbled. Tiffany smirked. "Just making sure we're aligned," Tiffany said sweetly. "Some people don't realize when they're pushing the line." I set my coffee down. "I don't push lines. I write them. Section 12A of the Federal Compliance Manual supersedes any HR memo. I'm sure you read that. If you read it all." Her jaw locked. The smile stayed, but it never touched her eyes. And just like that, they turned and walked off, whispering like they'd just dethroned a prom queen. I watched them go, and felt that familiar cold settle in my chest. I'd been here before. When a manager forgot my promotion paperwork. When I trained a junior analyst who got bumped ahead of me 6 months later. Office politics wasn't new. But this felt different. This was reckless. And reckless people are dangerous. At 2:04 p.m., Tiffany came back. Same perfume, same tight smile. This time, she circled my desk like a shark that had read too many LinkedIn articles about leadership energy. "Oh, wow," she said, voice syrupy and loud enough for Brenda to hear 3 desks over. "Those pants are interesting." I blinked, slow. Charcoal gray trousers, tailored. Subtle herringbones so fine it might as well have been woven by ghosts. Tiffany had apparently appointed herself fashion police of the fabric world. "I wasn't sure if you'd seen the handbook update," she went on. "Section 14B. You did read it, right?" I took a sip of my coffee. I edited it. Found 3 typos, by the way. Brenda let out a snort. Tiffany fake laughed and cocked her hip. "It's about cohesion," Brenda chirped again. "Team synergy starts with fabric integrity." I turned my chair toward them, my spine perfectly straight. "Is this a formal HR complaint?" Tiffany blinked. "Oh no, just a conversation. Woman to woman." "Good," I said. Because my contract doesn't include fake conversations about personal taste pretending to be policy. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Mark, my supervisor, lingering in the hallway, watching. He met my eyes, and then bolted. Coward. Tiffany leaned in, dropping her voice but keeping it fake sweet. Just making sure we're seen as reliable professionals, especially with sensitive government work coming up. We wouldn't want the wrong impression. And there it was. So she did know something was brewing. Or thought she did. I looked her dead in the eyes. The Department of Defense cares about classified data, not pinstripes. Her smile cracked. Barely. Before she turned and walked off. But I knew. This wasn't about dress codes. It was about control. And control? Control came at a cost. I glanced down at my purse, where my black DSS-issued badge sat zipped inside, silent and waiting. Clearance level. Top. The kind of clearance that took 6 months of vetting, home inspections, background checks. The kind of clearance this entire $50 million contract depended on. I smiled to myself. I didn't expect the official calendar invite to hit so soon. 3:12 p.m. Subject line: HR matter. Immediate attention required. No body text. No explanation. Just a time slot. 15 minutes from now, in room 3C. I stared at the screen. For a moment, I thought about declining. But declining wasn't an option. Not in a company where we value open dialogue was corporate code for comply or else. I locked my terminal. The soft beep of my security badge felt louder than usual. And stood up. It felt like standing for my own execution. The office around me hummed with fake busyness. Eyes flicked up, then darted away. Everyone knew. They always did. I walked past the interns pretending to scroll through spreadsheets, past Mark's office door. Blinds down, lights off. Of course. When I stepped into room 3C, Tiffany was already seated at the head of the table, iPad angled just so, like she was hosting a TED Talk on passive-aggressive management. To her right sat Brenda, nervously twirling a pink gel pen. To the left, Cal Morton, Senior Operations Manager. The same Cal who once congratulated me on a 70-page audit summary by saying, "That's a lot of words for compliance stuff." He looked wildly uncomfortable, like he'd been promised a quick witness role, not front row seats at a firing. "Mia," Tiffany said with that faux warm smile. "Thanks for joining us." "I was ordered to," I replied, sitting down with the kind of calm you practice in front of a mirror. Brenda cleared her throat and unfolded a printed script. Literal script, hands shaking just enough to make the paper crinkle. "This is a formal termination meeting," she began, voice rehearsed. "Conducted in accordance with corporate procedure outlined in Section 8B of the Employee Accountability Guidelines." I blinked once. Tiffany jumped in, eyes gleaming. "Due to repeated noncompliance with the updated dress code and a pattern of insubordination, the company has no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately." Brenda slid a 2-page document across the table. Final notice stamped across the top in bold red letters. I scanned it. My name, employee ID, defiance. That word appeared 3 times. No mention of my clearance, no mention of performance metrics. Nothing about the 6-figure contract I'd been shepherding for months. Just buzzwords like team cohesion and cultural alignment. I felt nothing. No anger, no panic. Just a hollow vacuum where belief used to be. Belief that competence still mattered in this place. "I see," I said quietly. "So, just to be clear, I'm being terminated for dress code violations?" Tiffany nodded. "Among other behavioral concerns, yes." "Such as?" Brenda fumbled. "Tone, resistance, comments perceived as undermining leadership." Tiffany cut in, her voice low and sharp. "Let's not make this harder than it has to be." I gave a dry laugh. No humor, just air. "You already did that when you turned woven wool into a crime." Her lips pressed into a thin line. We have standards, Tiffany said. You have obsessions, I replied. I have clearance. That landed like a punch. Tiffany opened her mouth, but nothing clever came out. A flicker of movement caught my eye, the glass wall behind them. On my lock terminal, a notification pulsed softly. DSS, System Check-in Overdue. Tiffany noticed it, smirked. Guess you won't be needing that anymore. I said nothing. I just stared at the blinking alert. They hadn't connected the dots. Not yet. Brenda spoke, softer now. Someone from IT will escort you out. Please collect your belongings. I stood, smooth, calm. Wouldn't want to cause a security breach, I said. Tiffany gave a tight little laugh. Let's not be dramatic, Mia. I turned toward the door, then stopped, looked back at them. You just fired the only person in this building who knows how to keep your government contract from collapsing like a dollar store tent. 3 faces, blank, uncomprehending. I smiled, slow and sharp. Enjoy your fabric integrity. The walk back to my desk felt longer than any walk I'd taken in that building. I kept my head high. I didn't slam my keyboard. I didn't send a flaming email. I just packed. They gave me one of those insultingly small cardboard boxes, the kind with barely enough space for a mug and a framed photo. Sympathy-sized. I started with the basics. The photo of my sister and me at Arches National Park. My legal pad, full of compliance notes and procurement deadlines. The small cactus I'd kept alive on my desk for 3 years, despite Brenda's overwatering attempts. I left the rest. The spreadsheets, the half-finished reports, the encrypted data logs blinking quietly on my monitor. They'd need those. And without me, they wouldn't know what any of it meant. At the bottom of my desk drawer sat my black DSS clearance badge, the one I'd earned after 6 months of vetting, background checks, and surprise home inspections. I picked it up slowly, like I was holding a live wire. It wasn't flashy. Just a slim black card with a barely visible RFID chip and a number printed at the bottom. A number that unlocked federal databases they didn't even know existed. I slipped it into its protective sleeve. The one labeled Property of DSS, Do Not Discard. I zipped it into my bag, heart steady. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I stood box in hand and made my way toward the exit. First stop, marketing. No one said a word. Rachel looked up, blinked, and immediately dropped her eyes back to her screen. Jason gave a quick nod, the kind you give someone you barely know in the frozen aisle at Trader Joe's. Next, accounting. One of the interns mouthed, "I'm so sorry," eyes wide like I'd just been diagnosed with something terminal. I gave a polite, dead-eyed smile. By the time I reached my cubicle, Mark was standing there, hands stuffed in his pockets like a guilty teenager. "Hey, Mia," he stammered. "Sorry to see you go." I tilted my head. "Are you?" His mouth opened, then closed. After a beat, he gave a quick nod. "Well, good luck out there." I stared at his back as he scurried off down the hallway, straight into the warm safety of corporate cowardice. I packed the last of my things in silence. No tears, no trembling, just a slow, simmering pressure crawling up my spine. The weight of public humiliation. Not loud, not explosive. The quiet kind. The kind that settles deep in your bones and echoes with every fake. "Are you okay?" I took the elevator down alone. At the front desk, the IT guy, I think his name was Dylan, waited for me. He looked everywhere but at my face as he handed over a sealed envelope. "Final paycheck. COBRA info," he mumbled. "Lovely," I said, dropping it into the box like trash. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. I turned to face the lobby. I watched it shrink away, the fake plants, the fake smiles, the fake everything, until the doors slid shut. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even mad. But something inside me shifted. A cold, sharp clarity. They thought this was over. They thought they'd handled the problem. They had no idea what they'd just triggered. I was halfway across the lobby, the envelope crumpling in my box, when the glass doors swung open behind me. It wasn't a client, or an interview candidate fumbling with a resume. It was two people, a man and a woman, matching dark suits, clean lines, quiet, confident movements. No logos, no name tags, just black lapel pins with a small silver ring. The unmistakable insignia of the Defense Security Service. The woman walked half a step ahead, scanning the room like she was casing it. The man flanked her, postured tight as a coiled spring. They weren't here for onboarding. I froze. I'd seen DSS agents before, during my clearance process. They didn't knock unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. They stopped at the front desk. The woman leaned in, voice low but firm. "We need to speak with Walter Phelps, head of security, and Brian Denning, your CEO, immediately." The receptionist blinked. "They're in meetings. Can I—" The man cut in. "Not a request." The receptionist fumbled for the phone like her hands had gone numb. I stayed where I was, the box heavy in my arms, my pulse suddenly loud in my ears. I didn't know what had triggered this. I didn't know how fast word had traveled. But I knew one thing. The government had noticed, and the people in that building were about to find out exactly what they'd done. I stood perfectly still, box in hand, breath shallow. I watched as the receptionist hung up the phone, her face pale, her fingers trembling slightly as she set the receiver back in place. They'll be down in just a minute," she whispered to the agents. The woman gave a single nod. The man didn't even blink. I knew their kind. They weren't here to have a friendly chat about policy. DSS didn't do friendly chats. I shifted slightly, adjusting the strap of my purse over my shoulder. From the corner of my eye, I caught the man scanning the lobby. His gaze swept past me, lingered for half a second, then moved on. He didn't recognize me. Not yet. I stared straight ahead, willing my heart to stay steady. Whatever happened next, I wasn't the one in trouble. I'd followed protocol. Every line, every clause, every absurd security check. I'd colored inside the lines so precisely that if they'd wanted to find fault, they'd have had to draw new lines themselves. A sharp ding cut through the air. The executive elevator, not the regular one. The doors opened, fast, controlled, and out stepped Tiffany. She was trying to walk like nothing was wrong. Chin up, posture stiff, but her face, pale, too pale. The kind of pale that comes from realizing you've just kicked a hornet's nest with a baseball bat. Brenda stumbled out behind her, clipboard nowhere in sight. They both moved fast, cutting across the lobby with the fake confidence of people hoping they weren't about to lose everything. Tiffany didn't even glance at me until she passed. Her eyes flicked toward mine, for a second, and then jerked away like I'd burned her. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. I just watched. She disappeared into a conference room with the two agents, the door clicking shut behind them. The lobby fell quiet again. That strange, humming silence you only hear in offices after something explodes. I could see heads popping up behind cubicles, pretending to look for printer paper or stretch their backs. Anything but openly admit they were desperate to know what was happening. The voices inside the room started low, then sharper. I couldn't make out the words, but fragments floated out, jagged as broken glass. Unauthorized access, clearance breach, protocol violation. I stood there, box in hand, my pulse flattening out into something calm. Like a wire stretched so tight it didn't even tremble. It didn't take long. Maybe 5 minutes. And then he arrived. Brian Denning, the CEO, sweating, breathless. Necktie yanked crooked like he'd tried to strangle himself on the elevator ride down. He bulldozed straight past the receptionist, ignored the front desk, eyes locked on me like I was the last lifeboat on the Titanic. "Mia," he said, smiling, too wide, too forced. "Would you mind stepping into my office? Just for a quick chat?" I didn't move. I no longer work here, I said, loud enough for half the lobby to hear. You'll have to make an appointment. His jaw worked, throat bobbing as if he couldn't decide whether to plead or order. Please, it'll only take a minute. I stood, slow, deliberate. I leveled my eyes at him, that sharp edge of calm I'd been perfecting for years settling into place. I'm sure your team can handle it, I said. After all, it's just fabric, right? The color drained from his face like someone had pulled the plug. I brushed past him. No rush, no glance back, just steady steps toward the glass doors. Behind me, I heard the conference room door open again. Tiffany came out, shaking, hands clasped together like she was trying to hold herself upright. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I knew the look on her face. I'd seen it before. The exact moment a person realizes they've set a fire they can't put out. She started to say something. Some breathless excuse. Some corporate speak defense. But I didn't give her the stage. I kept walking. I didn't need to see their faces. I'd already seen them. And they looked exactly like Justice. I'd barely made it 5 steps across the lobby when I heard the footsteps. Not the shuffle of interns, not the nervous tap of Brenda's kitten heels. No, these footsteps were steady, controlled. The kind of walk that didn't rush because it never had to. I turned just as the DSS agents approached. The woman, Agent Rossi, judging by the name on her lapel pin, gave me a brief nod. Miss Reynolds? She asked, her voice low, even. I raised an eyebrow. Still am, unless you're here to revoke that too. The man, Agent Miller, gave the faintest hint of a smile. We understand today's events were unexpected, he said. We'd like a moment of your time. Behind them, I caught sight of Brian and Tiffany standing near the ficus plant, both looking like they'd been hollowed out from the inside. Brian's dress shirt clung to him with damp streaks of sweat. Tiffany's eyes were red-rimmed, her hands shaking slightly. They weren't moving. They weren't speaking. They weren't in charge anymore. I nodded once. Of course. The agents flanked me, one on each side, but not in a way that felt hostile. More like respect, or maybe precaution. We didn't head into the conference room where Tiffany and Brian had been cornered moments before. Instead, Agent Rossi guided us toward the seating area near reception, out in the open, where the entire floor could see. A message. I wasn't being detained. I wasn't in trouble. I was the one they wanted cooperation from. Agent Miller spoke first. We're reviewing the protocol breach related to your termination. Your clearance record is, frankly, impeccable. Your work on the Q3 classified data audit flagged attention at the federal level. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I followed procedure. Rossi nodded back. Exactly. Which is why we're hoping you'll assist with the next phase of the project. The contract still stands. The contractor, however... She let the words trail off, glancing toward Brian, who now looked like a man watching his own career slip through his fingers. Brian took a slow step forward, his voice trembling with that special blend of desperation and corporate panic. Mia, let's be reasonable here. I looked at him, dead on. Reasonable? He rushed in, words tripping over each other. Obviously, mistakes were made, on both sides. I want to formally offer you your position back. I didn't move. And a raise, he added quickly. 15%, senior title. We'll put it in writing right now. The entire lobby fell silent. Even the receptionist had stopped typing. A junior exec outside the glass doors paused mid-vape. I tilted my head, letting the words hang there for a moment. The salary you can afford? I said slowly. Wouldn't even cover the therapy I'd need to forget working for you. Dead silence. Brian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He turned toward the agents. Maybe we could work something out? Agent Rossi shook her head, calm but final. We'll handle this. The government still needs this project completed, just not by you. I allowed myself the smallest smile. For the first time all day, it felt good. Not revenge, not triumph, just right. Agent Miller gave me a nod. We have a field office nearby. You'll be compensated for your time, of course. Brian looked like he'd been punched in the throat. Tiffany, still hovering nearby, looked like she might faint. Mascara smudged, lips parted like she was about to argue. But nothing came. Brenda? Nowhere in sight. Probably hiding in a supply closet, clutching her clipboard like a security blanket. I adjusted the strap on my purse. Let's go, I said. As we walked toward the exit, the entire office seemed to hold its breath. I didn't look back, because I didn't need to. They weren't the ones walking out with the agents. I was. We stepped out into the afternoon heat, Agent Rossi on my left, Agent Miller on my right. And for a brief moment, it felt like the whole world had shifted beneath my feet. Not because I'd been fired, not because I'd walked out in front of half the office, but because, for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their weight on my back. I was free. We crossed the parking lot in silence. Halfway to their government-issued black sedan, Agent Miller's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening by half a degree. 1 minute, he said quietly. He turned on his heel and walked briskly back toward the building. I didn't follow. Neither did Agent Rossi. We both stood there, watching as the glass doors swung open again, swallowing him back into the corporate mausoleum I'd just escaped. Inside, the office fell into that eerie kind of silence I'd come to know too well. The silence of people waiting for the sky to fall. Through the glass, I watched Agent Miller stride past the front desk, past the frozen receptionist, straight into the executive conference room. No knock. No hesitation. Brian was inside, hands on his hips, trying hard to project authority he no longer had. Tiffany hovered behind him, smaller somehow, like the air had been sucked out of her. Miller dropped a manila folder onto the glass table. The conversation started low. Brian's mouth moved faster than his words. Tiffany's eyes darted like a trapped animal. Then, Miller opened the folder. I couldn't hear the words. I didn't need to. I watched Brian's face change, not gradually, but in a single snap. First confusion, then recognition, then devastation. He sat down hard, like someone had pulled the bones out of him. Tiffany backed up until her shoulders hit the glass wall. Her lips moved. I could read it even from here. How? No answer came. When Miller stepped back out, he walked like a man who had just delivered a death sentence. I raised an eyebrow as he approached. All good? He gave a single nod. They've been notified. Of? I asked, already knowing the answer. Full federal audit, breach of protocol. Contract invalidated. They're under immediate review. I exhaled, slow and steady. Behind him, Brian followed, eyes hollow, face damp with the sweat of a man who knew exactly what this meant. $50 million in government contracts. Gone. Future federal partnerships? Gone. Company reputation? Shredded beyond repair. And Tiffany? She trailed behind Brian, mascara streaked, face pale, her world unraveling thread by thread. She didn't look at me. Couldn't. Miller and Rossi flanked me again as we walked toward the car. Rossi broke the silence first. You handled that well. I handled it quietly, I replied. There's a difference. Rossi smiled. A real one. She reached into her coat and handed me a card. Simple. Cream-colored. No title. Just a name, a direct number, and a faint DSS seal embossed like a silent promise. We subcontract oversight roles, she said, her tone deliberate. Especially when primary contractors are collapse. I turned the card over between my fingers. The pay better? Rossi's smile deepened. Better and cleaner. I gave a small laugh. You work for the government. Clean isn't exactly the word I'd use. We work with people who understand protocol, she said. People who don't flinch when idiots in HR try to wield power they don't understand. People who know when to stay quiet and when not to. I slipped the card into my pocket next to my badge. We didn't shake hands, didn't make promises, just a quiet understanding. By the time I reached my car, the sky had started to clear. The clouds pulled apart in soft streaks, and the sun cut through like a spotlight on a stage I'd finally stepped off. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. They'd spend months picking up the pieces, trying to explain how they'd fumbled a federal contract over a pair of dress pants. Trying to rewrite history and performance reviews and board meetings. But I'd be gone. And they'd never forget my name. I unlocked my car, tossed the envelope with my final paycheck onto the passenger seat, and sat for a moment, just breathing in the quiet. I wasn't just walking away from a job. I was stepping into the world I'd built, thread by thread, in the shadows of people who thought they owned me. They didn't. They never did.